You've probably noticed in your own applications that when you make a write to a collection on the client, like an insert, an update, or remove, the user interface gets updated right away. In other words, the local cache of data that we have gets updated immediately. And then at some later time, the local cache gets synchronized with the result that we get back from the server. And so the client needs to synchronize with the server. And I'll call this synchronize writes. So we need to be able to synchronize a write between the client and the server. In the rest of this video, I'd like to show you what that means. The code for this application is pretty simple. I have a collection called items that I've defined on the client and the server. And then a template that iterates over all of these items and prints each one to the screen. Now, you should already know from the pub sub chapter and from your applications that the way that we can see data is by using Meteor subscriptions. In this example, I'm subscribing to the item subscription, and then the server says that anyone subscribed to this should see all of the items in the items collection. And so that's what I'm allowed to see as the client. But what about making writes? A write is an insert or an update or a remove to the collection. In this example in the debugger, I've called the insert method of the items collection, and I'm trying to insert a document with a title of 3. If you recall, these methods here are just wrappers around Meteor methods, and so we can expect a method on the client and the server to be defined that looks like this. And so we have a client stub of the method and also the server version of the method. What this will do is on the client or in the stub, it will start off by inserting this document into our local browser cache of data. And you can think of this as just an in-memory copy of a bunch of documents. And our user interface is bound to that local copy. That way, when we insert this document into the local cache, the user interface can update right away without waiting. After we've done this, the RPC call will be made up to the server. And that's where the actual insert will happen on the server side with our real Mongo database. And the rule is simple. The server gets to decide ultimately which writes succeed, and also get to decide what the document looks like. So whatever data we get back from the server requires that we synchronize what we have in our local cache with what comes back from the server. So I'll just call this synchronizing writes or synchronize writes. Let me give you some examples and then we'll write some code. Let's say that we insert this item 3, but our publish function never sends the inserted data back down to us by the time the method completes. In that case, we'd have to remove this item from our local cache. In another example, let's say the server changes the title. So instead of 3, it adds an S or something like that to indicate that the server has updated it. In that case, we need to change our local cache to reflect the new data that came from the server. To make this more concrete, let's write a little bit of code. What I'm going to do is hack the server a little bit, and we're going to start off by deleting the method that Meteor created when we created this collection. So we'll replace that with our own so that we can play around. So off of the server object, we'll look for a method handler with this name, and we'll just delete it. Now, if we don't delete it before we define our own, Meteor will throw an error. So that's why we need to delete it. Otherwise, Meteor will say it already exists. Okay, so we've just replaced the items insert function with our own, and we'll start to play around. And the first thing I'm going to do here is create an ID variable, and we're going to use a special trick to create an ID for the items collection that's going to be the same ID as the one created on the client. Now, I'm not going to go into how this works in this video, but what you need to know is that the ID will be the same as the one created on the client. And you can go look at the make ID function if you'd like to study how it works. The next thing I need to do is to get access to the right fence so that we can block it and create a little bit of a delay so that we can see what's happening. So I'll say current right fence get, and then we'll create a write on it by calling the begin write method. Okay, and then before I forget, I'm going to assign the ID of the document that was passed up to the ID that we just created. And then finally, I'll return this ID to the caller, so that will be the result that gets sent back. Now, next what I'm going to do is set a timeout, and we'll just make it for 10 seconds later. 1, 2, 3. And then I'll commit the write. And this will have the effect of sending the updated message to the client, which will cause the synchronization to happen. Now, I'm not actually going to insert this document on the server. For now, I'm just going to assign the ID so we don't forget later, and then 10 seconds later, we'll say, okay, the whole method is complete. And let's look at what happens when we insert this new document into the items collection on the client. Okay, I'll press enter and you can see the client cache is updated right away. And about 10 seconds later, the server will say that it's done. And keep your eye trained here. Notice it just goes away. And that's because the server never actually sent an added message because we never inserted the document into the server-side Mongo. To get a closer look, we can look at the Network tab and click over on WebSockets and take a look at the frames. I've zoomed out a bit so we can see the DDP messages. Here's the method call to items insert. And we get the result back from the server. And that happens at the same time. And then 10 seconds later, we get the updated message. And that's the server telling us that the Meteor method is complete. And that we should, at this point, have all the data from the server. Since we didn't get an added message from the server, this means that the document, we shouldn't have access to it, and so the client will revert this back to the original value, which was undefined. So it just gets rid of it. In the next example, let's look at how the server could possibly change the document. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, let's update the document title on the server by appending this in parentheses S. And so it'll be a little symbol, a little sign that we've updated this field on the server. And then this time around, I'm actually going to do the insert. So I'll call items insert, which is the server-side insert function. So this will go right into the actual Mongo database on the server, and I'll insert the document. Now, calling this insert function should send an added message to the client to indicate that the document has been added. And then 10 seconds later, we'll send the update message. Okay, so I'll save that and come over here and we'll press enter again. And once again, the client gets updated immediately. And about 10 seconds later, when the write fence gets committed, notice that the server sends back a result and the client cache gets synchronized or updated with what we got back from the server. And so this extra S gets appended to the title. Let's take a look at the DDP messages again. This time around, we make the method call just like before, but we get back an added message from the publish function on the server saying that this document has been added. And then we get a result, which is the return value from the server-side method. And then finally, about 10 seconds later, you can see the 16 here instead of a 6, so that's about 10 seconds later, we call the committed method on the fence, and that causes this updated message to get sent. And at this point, we do have some data. We got it here. And so the client will synchronize with what we got back from the server, and then the user interface gets updated, and we append this S here. So in the next few videos, we'll dive into the mechanics of how this works, but I wanted to, in this video, give you some intuition about what it means to synchronize a write on the client with what we get back from the server. So in this video, we looked at how the server-side method ultimately decides what to do with the write, and then the client at some later time will synchronize itself with what the server says it should be seeing.